So, as we were talking earlier, that it's the uh, industries, they let out dangerous gases through their smoke, which causes air pollution and which causes a concentration of the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, which causes global warming. But this kind of global warming, there are other things also that contribute to global warming. There are many more things than deforestation, uh, and many more things than industry. Actually, it is all connected to human greed. It is all connected to human desire for wealth, for money, for benefits. So, one of the prime areas here is agriculture. So, agriculture is no more the thing it used to be in the past. In the past, where farmers were growing crops and they were going according to the cycles of nature, and everything went according to season. They had to plant something in the rainy seasons, or they had to do some harvesting maybe in the winter season. So everything was fixed according to seasons. But today there is a great disturbance in seasons, untimely rain, untimely summer heat, and what else? There's cattle rearing. It was earlier, cows and cattle were raised just for use, for milking them, or it was like basic needs. But today's industrialization has made cattle rearing an industry. Think about the meat eating in America. People are suffering from obesity because of the fast food joints. And what do the fast food joints survive on? They survive on meat burgers. And where does the meat come from? The cattle being bred at huge levels, consuming a lot of crop, and releasing a lot of methane because of the cow dung. So I mean, you have to question yourself, which industry is not touched by this desire for benefit? It's the same about poultry. The chicken is supposed to be the most important bird. Everybody wants to eat chicken. And what happens? It's no longer the home chicken, the homely chicken that was bred on farms, small farms and by private farmers. Now it is a poultry industry. Everything is mechanized. So whether it's getting meat or even milk or eggs or chicken, all the release of the output of the from all these animals, it creates more greenhouse gases, and thus in today's world, I have seen awakening come in from various quarters, people talking about eating less meat, people talking about moving away from dairy. Why? Because milk is no longer pure, because the meat is no longer pure, and switching to nature, switching to being vegetarians because of this reason. Because the food that was meant to benefit the body, that was meant to heal, has lost it, because commercialization and industry is filling it with its chemicals and hormones. So you can see how far reaching the effects of this global warming are, and from the simple reason of human greed. There are so many facets to global warming, so many causes. Another major cause is oil spills. Now, we talk about the oil being taken out from underground, from those reserves, and there's a whole industry for drilling oil. It's expensive. There are wars in the world over this oil. So it's a whole industry with trillions and billions of dollars invested in it. And yet, I have to go back to those examples of the war in Iraq, the how the U.S. occupation in Iraq was there, which was termed Desert Shield and Desert Storm. And what happened after the soldiers were taken back? The oil wells burned for years and decades together, which were just ruinous. What was happening? Nobody could put out those oil fires that burnt and burnt, and this was reckless. So, such accidents with oil happen constantly. So, either it's because of the wars and there is negligence of how it is handled, or there are oil spills when this oil is being shipped across the ocean. And the outcome of these oil spills is terrible. These oil spills, they harm marine life. Think about a glass of oil that you may drop on your bathroom floor. What happens? You might slip over it, you spoil the color of it. I mean, it is a mess. So think the ocean that supports human life, that having this oil concentration in it, it kills the birds and the fish, and it stops reproduction. And I've seen videos, I have read stories about these poor birds, choked with oil, lying on the beaches, or the fish, or the turtles being choked with oil. So don't we call this cruelty? This is what global warming is about. It is insensitivity, it is greed, it is insensitivity, it is greed, it is uh, this is ruthless profit. It makes seafood unsafe to eat. It is a major cause of climate change. The Deepwater Horizon oil spill in Mexico in 2010 is the largest oil spill in history. And another fact related to this is that it takes a very long time to get this oil out of the water. It's a long process, and much expertise and much expense is needed to clear the water. It's not an easy thing. So you can see the outcome of commerce and expansion, how it is leading to global warming and harming the atmosphere for ourselves as well as other things on this earth. So what are the effects on the environment? There are numerous effects on the environment, too many to even talk about in my lessons. So one of them, as we have already discussed, is global warming. The increased greenhouse gas concentrations leading to higher global temperatures. And when these global temperatures are high, what happens to the polar ice caps? The ice starts melting. And when the ice starts melting, the water flows into to the ocean, eventually to the rivers, and the sea levels rise. And when the sea levels rise, what happens to those coastal areas that subsist on the sea? They get drowned. So we know about certain countries like Indonesia and others, which are coastal areas, which are doomed in the future to be drowned because of this rising sea level. So whereas sea level in the past thousands of years, the rise was very slow, but now the rise is going up higher and higher and faster and faster. So sea level rise is because of the melting polar ice caps and the glaciers. And think of the habitat. Who lives in those polar ice caps? There are seals over there, there are polar bears over there. They live in the ice, they live in the snow. That is their habitat. When that is lost, that that life is lost, that biodiversity is lost. When when the water is poisoned with oil, then the fish die. So everywhere it's poison that is being spread. So this is called ocean acidification. When the increased CO2 levels are absorbed by oceans, because we already know that one part of the heat of the sun is absorbed by the land and the sea. So when this is increasing, the oceans are growing warmer, then life in the oceans is disturbed, because the balance of those lives on the temperature of the oceans is very delicate. A minor change in the temperature leads to higher acidity and affects marine life. And so marine life, we do not know everything about the ocean even today. There are rare forms of life there, all kinds of fish, unicellular organisms, and rare plant life, and most of it must have been extinct by today because of the acidification. And one of the important components of the ocean, which we'll discuss later, is the coral reef. Now, coral reef are ocean organisms, unicellular ocean organisms that are crucial to the ocean temperatures. They maintain the temperature of the ocean. Now, they are also being harvested. Well, they are harvested for medicines, they are harvested for jewelry, for crafts, and also they are being destroyed because they cannot withstand the acidification of the ocean. On the top of that, there are many species that are dependent on this coral reef, and they are also suffering because of that. So the coral reef gets destroyed, then there are other species of ocean life, the marine biodiversity that gets affected. So these are the terrible effects on environment, and we can go and on because things are just connected. Then we have extreme weather events which become more severe, more frequent, such as storms, heat waves, droughts, and heavy rainfall. Now think about a scenario in a place that may have, like Cherrapunji, may have received the highest rainfall in the world, and there the rainfall has become lower, and there are desert areas where there was no rainfall, and there they are getting rain. So there's a total disbalance. The climate patterns have changed, and there is destruction caused because of these extreme weather events. And another thing which you could discuss in relation to this is COVID. That so much of research is being done on COVID, why it happened. Well, it was one of the parts of the outcomes of climate change, of global warming, the creation of new microbes, new viruses which come as a result of warming, too much of warming, or the migration of viruses or vectors from one place to another. We will later discuss one novel which is about butterflies, which is called, the title is Flight Behavior. How the flooding in Mexico led the butterflies to migrate into North America for survival, and they had to fly thousands of miles to save themselves. But there we are talking about butterflies, but what about viruses and microbes? And for instance, there was this Ebola virus which was very much in the news recently, and there were things discussed about its disastrous effects on the human brain. So there was a study that showed that Ebola, when it came into certain countries, actually it was a kind of virus that exists in the remote forests or rivers somewhere in Africa. So the stunning thing was, how did it manage to reach America? This is the thing. This is global warming, and this leads to the migration of various unicellular organisms for the sake of survival, helps in the spread of diseases, and in the creation of new diseases because of this. And when we talk of Delhi, we see how high the pollution is and how high the lung infections are over there. So this is one of the results, the resultant diseases caused by global warming. And human beings tend to ignore, and they tend to only think in terms of the present and their present life. But somebody should ask, what about the future climate? What will we give to the people who are going to come tomorrow? If we are going to destroy everything now, what is going to be left tomorrow? So what are the sources? Let's discuss some more sources of greenhouse gases. Carbon dioxide. As we have discussed, it comes from fossil fuels, it comes from deforestation, it comes from industrial processes, as I said, related to even to food, to processing of fish and meat and so many other things. I don't know any area which is not touched by industrialization. And when we talk about healthy food today, we are told not to eat processed food. Everything is processed today. All fish, all kinds of meat, all even vegetable products, everything is being processed. Food is passed on in tins and in packages. So anything that comes out of packages is not going to be healthy. And this harms us, harms the environment and harms us also. Methane coming from livestock digestion, rice paddies, landfills, oil and gas extractions. So rice paddies are there. Probably even today, when there have been warnings that one must not burn leftover, straw from wheat, leftover grass from rice, the burning is still there. Not to burn off the dry leaves, which releases methane into the atmosphere. We know in India that in the month around, I think, January or February, it's high in pollution because the wheat uh, grass is burnt up. The leftover stubbles of wheat are burnt over. So methane is a great polluter. Nitrous oxide, where does it come from? It also comes from agricultural activities, industrial processes, and combustion of organic matter. Again, this burning up of organic matter. And there are such easy ways of getting rid of this organic matter that is not needed. It could always be created into compost, but somehow in India it is still burnt, and the pollution is very high in those early months of a year. And normally we talk between us and we say, oh, in Punjab it is happening right now. There's wheat crop, they are burning the fire and all. So, fluorinated gases, synthetic gases used in industrial applications, refrigeration, and air conditioning. These are called CFCs, these fluorocarbons. They are the ones that burn a hole in the ozone. And yet we want to use room fresheners, and yet we want to use refrigerators and ACs to the maximum. On the other hand, the argument could be that it is growing hotter and hotter on the planet, and those who can afford to escape the heat, well, they get refrigerators and they get ACs. And the interesting or ironical thing is, the more ACs you have, and you might be safe in your house getting cooled off. But the poor person who is living outside, he gets your heat because they deliver a lot of heat, these machines, and the outside gets more heated. So, this kind of thing happens in automobiles also. The places where there are less cars on the roads, they are cooler in summers, and where they are more, there the temperatures are burning, the asphalt reflects the heat, and then we have the cars that are giving out heat. So we can see how this uh, all this human activity, all this commercialization, it is a source of greenhouse gases, it is a source of uh, global warming, and any dents that we can make can help the planet. Any small efforts that we can make can help the planet. And literature is a wonderful tool to tell you how you can address climate change, to look into things in a deeper level, to look at the psychology of suffering of climate change. Literature tells you all that. There is something called carbon sink, and carbon sink has been discussed a lot lately in newspapers. The Guardian newspaper talked a lot about carbon sinks recently. And what are these carbon sinks? These are those areas on the planet which absorb extra carbon dioxide. And if you think about these carbon assimilators, they are forests, they are oceans, they are wetlands. But are we preserving them? We are depleting these three areas. We are reducing the capacity of the ocean to absorb this carbon dioxide by acidifying it. We are cutting down the trees and forests. We are reducing the ability of these forests. We are reducing the ability of the wetlands because the drought is coming and they are getting dried up. So killing biodiversity, introducing drought or introducing floods, all this mess, it is removing the carbon sinks which are so essential to save us from the extreme climate events. And destruction of these natural habitats has led to an increase in global temperatures. And it is something that we can work at. It is something that literature looks at. And the stories that we read in literature or the movies that we see related to these issues are extremely interesting. And unlike science or political science or economics, which commoners or laymen cannot reach, the movie can take you there. I would like to give this example of this problem in forest from this Indian film titled Sherni. Now, it deals with a lot of issues. It deals with a lot of climate issues, but the main uh, issue in this is about a tigress. That's why it's titled Sherni. Now, these forests, when we are harming them, we are cutting down trees, we are using up the land for our farms, or the villages are extending further and further, and the forests are shrinking. So, what happens to the habitat of these animals that live there, the wolf, the hyena, the tigers? Well, they also have to survive. So, for their survival, they start moving into the villages. So, Sherni is one such story about this man eating tiger which has started moving into the village and it is killing villagers. And there is a outcry in the village to do something about it, and the scientists and the hunters and all people, researchers, come to the village to study this issue. And the real thing that they discover is the animal they think, which is the man eater, is not this female tigress, this sherni. It is not her. The man eater is another one. But what happens is that they are unable to trace that. Now we come into the dangerous nexus of politics. The people are concerned because every few weeks one person is killed, and they are stressing on the local government and all that, their panchayats, that do something. Uh, you know, our lives are at stake. So the panchayat is concerned and they are trying to look for that tiger and they're not able to find it. And then this news comes in that there's this female tigress, that is, she's the only one, and she's left there in that forest trying to survive, to find a place for herself. Now, as the political nexus steps in, there's a leader who wants to win the elections, and he has no tool in his hands how to convince the villagers that he will get rid of the man eater. And he says that the tigress out there is the man eater, and we will kill it and we will track it. Don't you worry, we will free you. And now this political story is built up so that he wins the elections, and eventually that tigress is killed, and there are some kind souls who save the cubs. But see how politics works, and how the outcomes are there of this destruction of natural habitats. There are more and more stories of bear attacks, of lion attacks, of man eaters, of fox predators, of wolves, and snakes coming into human areas because they are displaced. So this is the thing about the depletion of carbon sinks and the depletion of those areas which have saved human beings. We just talked about biodiversity, we talked about animals. There is a whole ecosystem in forest which we call biodiversity. It can be on islands, and every country has its unique biodiversity. No two biodiversities are the same. Every country has unique plants, flora, fauna, and they are, in today's world, many of them are endangered species, and there are many species that children of today will never have heard of and never known. So whether it's the ocean, or whether it's the mountains, or whether it's the forest or the rivers, they are endangered species. There's a habitat loss, and caused by the change in temperature, which has endangered these species. We talked about the polar bears and the life in the ice. When that is growing warmer, they are deprived of ice, they eventually die out. And interestingly, literature is concerned to these habitats and these environments. The culture has a literature associated with it. So if you go to reading stories, you will read stories about life of the Eskimos who live in the ice and snow. Or you might read story of the native Indians, how they lived in South America, how they used the natural sources of food, rare plants and rare animals. So their story was different. So biodiversity is so closely linked to literature. It gives you such a unique literature. You talk about literature in India. We talk about literature that is from the tribal areas of Assam. It is unique, it is interesting, and it is all linked to the climate. That culture is linked to the climate. When you talk about the fisher folk somewhere, their fishing life, their fishing community have their own story, their own language, their own culture, which is extremely interesting, which is valuable. This is how climate and weather are linked to literature. So culture cannot come without climate. It is the climate, it is the weather that shapes a culture, because it is that on which human beings survive. So another impact is migration. Species are forced to move to new areas, leading to conflicts with human activities. As I said, when we talk about the malarial mosquito, Anopheles mosquito, it was used to the swamps. It was not something that was supposed to be there in cooler areas. But there is a mass migration of all these species, and then it comes to attack human beings. And between the male and the female mosquitoes also, we know one of them does not prey on human beings. They live in the grass and the vegetation. In many countries, you will see mosquitoes that are very large in size, but they live in the native area and they do not live on human blood. But when they migrate for survival, they become a menace for human beings. So in this, you have so many things that become menace. We have the menace of the locusts, which visit Pakistan every month, and that destroys crops. So again, this is all because of varying climate temperatures, and they seek survival and they try to migrate, and they cause harm to other areas by going there. Another outcome is extinction of these species. Some of them adapt and they try to survive in other places, but there may be others that cannot manage to adapt, and that's why they are extinct. So we have numerous birds, animals, sea animals, animals that are in the polar regions that have not survived because they could not survive the change in atmosphere, the change in climate. So we can see how closely literature is linked to climate through culture. Here is a picture of these dead whales on the beach, and this is a common phenomena. Look at the beach that is littered with dead whales, and often on, if you look at YouTube videos, you will see that the whales sometimes they come in a very bad state, very sick. They come to the coast, and there are people out there who are rescuing them, taking them to shelters, and trying to help in rehabilitating them. So, rehabilitating is one way that people are trying to help out for all these sick and endangered species. But it's not enough. If we continue at the current pace of the way we use our cars, the way we burn petrol, the way we litter our surroundings with poisons, litter and spoil our atmosphere with gases, then all the change that we are trying to bring in, that will be very slow. We have to slow down on our destructive activity also, alongside turning constructive, trying to do some healing. So let us look at the health aspects of this destruction, the impacts on human health. We have already discussed. So far, we discussed impacts on biodiversity and environment. We will now go into the impact on human health in the next lesson. I hope this lesson was valuable to you in talking about the impacts of climate change and the connection between climate change and literature. Thank you till we meet again in the next lesson.